Welcome everyone to our next session on the new normal and the role of volunteering. My name is Ester Martinez. I'm the CEO and Editor-in-Chief at People Matters. It's my pleasure and my privilege to be hosting this CHRO panel. What we're going to be covering today is what is that CHROs are doing to adapt to this new reality and how are they leveraging the opportunities that volunteering is bringing to the fore to deal with the enormous changes in our reality of remote working, well-being, racial justice, and health and safety. So it's a pleasure to welcome our panelists today as part of the CHRO panel at the Good Era Karma Summit 2020. So quick round of introductions before we get started. It's my privilege to welcome Jill Penrose. She's the Chief People and Administration Officer at the J.M. Smucker Company. She has been associated with the organization for 16 years, and she's grown across leadership roles in HR and corporate communications. So welcome, Jill, to the Good Era Karma Summit.
Thank you.
Very warm welcome. Joining us as well, we have Sean Vanderelzen. He's the Chief HR Officer, Marketing and Communication at the Lineage Logistics, one of the world's largest refrigerated warehousing companies. Sean has been associated with the organization for more than 55 years. My apologies. And before that, he was with General Motors. So very warm welcome, Sean, to the panel as well.
Thank you, Esther. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much. We have Madan Nagaldinne, Chief People Officer at Bling Health. Prior to Bling Health, Madan was a CHRO of Compass and had the privilege to meet him and work with him when he was at Facebook, both in the US and Asia Pacific. So very warm welcome, Madan, to the Good Era Karma Summit as well.
Thank you, Esther. Look forward to it.
Wonderful. So what are we going to be doing together as a team today is deep dive into three main areas that we have curated for all of you to take you through the journey of what's going on in the lives of CHROs and how are we navigating the challenges that our organization is going through. So that's going to be the first part of the conversation. The second is going to be double clicking a little bit about the value of care. Not only care as an internal value that it's come to the fore more than ever before, but also care as a value outside of the organization. So we're going to spend a little bit of time there. And after that, we're going to be focusing on how volunteering is actually helping us as a CHRO community to create higher engagement, to create higher balance of health and well-being, and also to build that inclusive workforce. So we're going to be starting with the first question, Jill, and I'm coming to you on going on a reflection on the top challenges that we need to address as a community to be able to keep employee morale. I think the employee morale and the employee effectiveness is a balance that we really are navigating in today's context. So what is the one top challenge? And we're going to do a round robin. So Jill, I'm going to come to you first, then Sean, Madan, and then I'm going to come to you again, Jill, with if you have more challenges. One challenge on how are you keeping, as an organization, employee morale and effectiveness, and how are you addressing that challenge? Go ahead.
Esther, thanks. It's great to be here with all of you. The J.M. Smucker Company, we are a human and pet food company, and part of our culture is very focused on people, and it always has been. And we talk about and train our leaders in this concept of being present with and leading the whole person. So not just the employee who is our colleague at work, but recognizing that people have lives outside of work. And I think that is no more present than it is right now. And it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. So it's a challenge in the sense that people are dealing with things at a greater degree than they ever have as it relates to just being well, keeping themselves safe, keeping their families safe. Childcare is a major issue that I know all of our businesses are navigating through. Elder care, and that both includes caring for parents as well as not being able to be with parents and family members because they may be in places where our employees are unable to visit them because of requirements. And then also financial issues that people may be experiencing because somebody in their family has lost a job or has had work reduced. And so from the very beginning of the COVID crisis, this is a challenge because in order for people to be present and engaged at work, we have to think of them and their whole lives and all of the things that they are dealing with. And so I think the way we have tried to manage that is, number one, just to acknowledge it and continue to remind all of our leaders of the criticality of that, and that you can't just manage the work and you can't just manage what happens in the workplace, but we have to help people figure out and solve and manage all of these other things so that they can be well and then be present at work.
Wonderful, wonderful. So looking at individuals as a whole, and the starting point that you mentioned was about just acknowledging that reality that we are now living in this completely integrated work and life and challenges all put together. So thank you, Jill, for sharing that. Sean, what is the one challenge that you've seen for keeping employee morale and effectiveness, and how have you addressed them?
Yeah, thanks, Esther. The one thing Jill and I have in common is we're both in the food business. So we actually, Jill's company is a large customer of ours, and we early on in the pandemic, you may remember that grocery store shelves were empty, not just in the United States, but all around the world. And so one of the things I think I have to start this conversation with is our purpose statement, and that is to transform the food supply chain, eliminate waste, and help feed the world. And depending on, whatever the subject is we need to rally our team members around, we kind of break that purpose down into those three parts: transform, eliminate, and help feed the world. And in early March and going into early April, we really had to focus on how do we as a company help feed the world. In order to really best do that, though, the first thing we had to do is figure out how to keep our team members safe as they came to work. About 82% of our workforce works in one of our warehouses, and we weren't going to be able to live that part of our purpose if we couldn't keep them safe. Safe's our number one value too, so we always want people leaving work in the same condition they came into work or better. And frankly, with all the unknowns, it was a pretty dynamic time in the world at that point in time. So we hired a medical professional, we hired different various consultants. We paid close attention to kind of the daily, almost hour by hour dynamic that was happening within the evolving COVID pandemic. And one of the greatest things about it, I'll say about a month into this whole challenge, one of our team members wrote me an email personally to me and said, "I feel safer when I'm at work than when I'm not at work." So I felt really good about the things we were doing, and we put in place to establish the right safety measures for people as they came into work. But it definitely was a challenge, continues to be one, and we'll continue to manage it as this thing evolves.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Sean, for sharing that as well. And Madan, I'm coming to you on the same question before I go to Jill again for one more round on challenges and how do you address them?
Yeah, thanks. So I work for Blink Health. We're in the healthcare space, specifically focused on saying how can we make healthcare and specifically prescription medication affordable to all Americans. We spend a staggering $500 billion a year in the U.S. just on prescription medication, and from the time the drugs are priced to the time it's consumed by the patient or it's given to the patient, there is incredible amount of markups that happen, almost 6-7x, and it's unaffordable for many, many people. So it is, when I look at it through the lens of, how does it impact our employees, I think it's clearly, there are a bunch of ways you can kind of think about the unfolding situation and the impact on employees. And as for me, it is about how do you make sure that people feel that they belong and people feel they're included. And this concept of inclusiveness and belonging, and also equity, meaning that do I have a say in what's happening? It's not just that I belong and I'm included, but do I actually have a say in what's happening is very, very important, because right now you're isolated, psychologically in probably in front of your screen with very little interaction with your employees, with your peers and with your manager, etc. So that is something that just came upon all of us overnight. None of us across the world were prepared for anything like that. So then you want to stay in your little room, wherever you are. How do you now instill the sense that I belong here? And this is a place that truly is progressive in terms of inclusiveness, belonging, diversity, and therefore I feel a sense of community. how do you create sense of community in front of this laptop? I think, Esther, before you restarted this meeting, you created this 5-10 minute safe space for all of us to kind of chat about what's going on. And we started to feel like we are, we kind of know each other for 10 minutes. We didn't go in and say, okay, let's start with these questions and answer them. So, and then if you have to do that at scale, 300, 500, 5,000 employees, then you have to have a plan. So my SVP of talent, Barsha Vig, amazing leader, she took upon it herself to say, I need to approach this completely differently. It can't be a bunch of Zoom meetings and that's how we live our lives. So we created this entire approach on creating community and belonging. We did a bunch of things apart from all the Zoom meetings, everything from cooking classes to yoga to what we call a blinker size, to having a family night, to inviting people from different communities, talking about all the issues that happen, are things that we're starting to do. And what we've found is very interesting. We've found much more participation in these events. And this is held through now for 4 months, where the socially responsible employee that we all want to be and are, I think it comes out much more effectively on a virtual screen, and people are contributing with their wallet, with their time, and with their commitment. Esther? Yeah, sorry. Uh-oh.
I think I must have. Yes,
I'm not sure how much of that you got. Probably we lost all of it.
Yeah. No, I lost you, Madan, when you were saying that if we need to create a sense of belonging, we must have a plan, especially if we have to do it at scale. And if we do it in a context that is distributed. That's where I lost you.
Yeah, I was concluding saying, as head of HRs and leaders of people teams, which is now probably at the center of every company, having a clear plan and saying that this is the new normal, and just hoping that these concepts would just get created is not a strategy. I think that's what I was saying, being deliberate about it is very, very helpful, has been very helpful, at least for us.
Wonderful. And I'm going to come to you maybe for some additional details on that. Jill, you were in the first round, you were sharing about the acknowledgement of the new reality for individuals' lives and really understanding that the situation has changed at the individual level as well. Anything that you'd like to share over and above of how you've been able to support your employees to keep the morale and effectiveness? So one is the acknowledgement. What else has worked for you?
Communication is always important in all of our organizations as people are distributed across nations and the world. I would say that has only been amplified, and people's desire for connection, to the conversation we were just having, is very significant. When we have surveyed our employees through formal surveys as well as just conversation and trying to listen to them, that is the thing that rises to the surface. So most of our employees are like Sean's, working in manufacturing and distribution centers, and so they've been essential workers. But for those who are not and are corporate employees and have been working remotely for a long time, the concerns around loneliness and connecting with other people are at the top of their mind. And when we start to consider ways to get people back in the workplace, their desire is not so much about the work, it's about the connection and about the relationship. And so continuing to communicate with people to allow them to come together through virtual events like this and otherwise. But I think also just sharing what we know and what we're thinking about for the future. There's a great deal of uncertainty around how things are going to unfold. And what we have found is a need to, even when we don't have the answer, communicate, here are the things we're thinking about, that we're looking at, here's what might influence our decision, here's what might change our decision, and asking for feedback. And we might do that 1 week and think we've communicated it, and you're getting some of these same questions. So because people are on just information overload and I think overwhelmed by the situation, we have found communication to be just absolutely critical, and repetition, and just being authentic and honest. We as a company also do not have all the answers. And I think sharing where we do have clarity versus where we're also monitoring the situation as well, so that we can help people understand our plans going forward.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jill, for sharing that as well. So, Sean, anything over and above the health, the safety layer that you mentioned as the hygiene, and really a very important component of morale, because I feel safe, and I love your example when you shared that one of your colleagues actually shared an email saying that I feel safer at home, and that probably was the hygiene that you had to focus on. What else worked for you to keep morale and effectiveness? And it's of course still continuing even today.
I would actually leverage exactly what Jill said. This is actually where, during the time of the pandemic, the two parts of my role, the HR side and the marketing and communications side, came together in a big way. Yeah. But communication is a really strong, was and continues to be a really strong need within, I think, all organizations right now. And especially given what I said earlier, that it's such a dynamic environment right now in 2020. Dynamic doesn't always mean good. Dynamic is that it's ever changing and that things are evolving. And one day we think we've got the best science at our backs, and the next day we find out that maybe that wasn't either totally correct or it was totally wrong, And so we have to change gears pretty frequently. So since we started in February with our first COVID, sort of all hands meeting, about every other week, we've gotten our team of 600 leaders together and said, here's where we're at this week. And sometimes it was just, we're at the same place we were last week. We're just doing it more, and, and continue to remind people to, to keep doing all the safety measures, to keep communicating with their workforce. We would put together some communication materials out of each of those meetings that we asked them to cascade down. And, I think it's kind of interesting, because I think we'll learn a lot of lessons that come out of 2020 with all the things that are going on. And I think one of them is around communication. Why don't we communicate like this all the time? Jill said authentically, transparently, and I think she even said something about even communicating when we don't have all the answers. Well, we never have all the answers, so why don't we just act like that in our normal communications every day and be authentic with our workforce? And we did a survey, for example, after about a month and a half of doing these meetings, and asked our leaders, basically, are these half-an-hour calls every other week a good use of your time or not? It was one of the highest survey results I've ever seen. 99.5% said it was a good use of their time. So, very, very small percentage said that it wasn't, and 0.5% of our leadership population. And so, I think that's my big takeaway from this year. And another significant challenge, I use this expression with my team, 7 times 7 ways, which means you've got to communicate 7 times 7 ways, kind of get sick of your own message before people even start to hear the message. And so I think there's no better year for 7 times 7 ways than 2020.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sean, for building on to Jill's point, because I think communication 7 times, I think throughout the panel today, we will at least cover communication 5 more times. That's my commitment to the group. So 2 done. So Madan, I'm coming to you with either tell us more about how you constructed that architecture of bringing your own community together, because I think that was very interesting. Or you can add one more point, whichever of the 2 you would like to share with us.
Yeah. I was about to make a joke saying, Sean, sorry, I just heard it once. Please tell me 6 more times. I love that. That's very fine. Thank you. So I want to look at some data out here in terms of, so what's real? It's a digital renaissance, if you want to call it, at least for work. The reason that every CHRO has, probably you don't even have a minute on your schedule for yourself, is because this massive digital renaissance in the last 4 months, and companies that have caught on, as I think Sean was mentioning, why don't we communicate about this more often? Why don't we be like this more often? So I think it's very, very true that you're seeing a future of work play out in real time. There's no more future of work, that is here right now. And the changes that are happening is quite dramatic. So for me, let's look at the data in terms of what drives engagement, inclusiveness, and belonging. One of the, and I think all of us have read or kind of either implemented some version of the Gallup engagement score or some version of very strong science-based engagement approaches to get people to be totally connected to the mission. And one of the questions or one of the topic themes that have a disproportionate impact on people feeling engaged is, do I know what is expected out of me at work? All right, that's the first question. If you take any engagement survey, it doesn't matter if it's Gallup or Culture Amp or any of the science behind it. The core is, do I know what is expected out of me at work? The second one is, do I have all the materials and inputs and coaching needed for me to be successful? The first question is, do I know what is expected out of me at work? It's very different in a Zoom-based, work from anywhere, globally dispersed, locally relevant employee. And if you don't focus on that, because the science on that is unmistakable, and if you don't focus on that, then you're going to have employees not knowing what success actually means. And so you can focus on diversity, inclusiveness, belonging, etc. But at the uber layer or the superset of that is, do people know what is expected out of them? Does my manager sit down with me and saying, okay, Madan, you're operating out here in this environment, and as my role, this is what I expect out of you. And if we don't have the expectation framework, then you can't drive diversity, inclusiveness, and belonging. The second piece is, again, contributes significantly to engagement is, do I have both the physical materials or do I have the digital equipment and the inputs and training and coaching and feedback from my manager to make sure that, that I'm on the right track. That has, again, a very disproportionate impact on employee engagement, inclusive, belonging, communication, etc. So now if you expect, just look at it this way, if you expect employees to say, here is a laptop that works for you, go on Zoom all the time, and you don't take into account these minor things, the glare, the impact on your ergonomics, on your eye, the impact on the sound that is coming in, the constant surround sound that you're going to have because you're going to be with your family, with kids, etc. And then don't think about it saying, hey, do we need to think about work from home, digital allowance to make people that much more comfortable? That's on us. That's on us as heads of HRs to start thinking about, in the old world where people would go to the office, you would spend hundreds of thousands, probably millions of dollars on creating a phenomenal workplace. Now you don't have that, and then you're putting people back into, go sit somewhere with a laptop, with your own headphone and make it work. And that is two extremes, which is very hard for employees to, hard for all of us to kind of come to terms with. And I would love to have an incredible sound canceling or noise canceling headphone. I would love to have a speaker over here. I would love to have advice from my ergonomics person in my company that the chair that I'm sitting on is the right one. And I would want my employer, my company, my manager to be at least concerned about it. And so you have to go back to the core science that exists on all of these topics and communication, engagement, mental health, diversity, inclusion, etc., and start to see which one of them are relevant and how do you, because you don't have data right now to say, oh, doing all of this is going to make an engaged employees, but you have something from the past that has worked. You have a new situation unfolding, and you have to have be a little more creative out here before you get the data on to say that these are the new employee engagement tenets that actually create a digitally engaged workforce. And that's on us as heads of HR to redefine what's the digitally engaged workforce. What is a digitally, high-performing team that is digital? So I think you take these old world concepts or physical world concepts in offices and then translate them to the situation we're in. And there's nobody else doing it for us. We have to do it ourselves. And therefore, you see a lot of HR leaders come together as communities, and you see these CHRO groups starting to pop up, and where the discussions are very real. And then I get a lot out of them, and that's how I look at this.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Madan, for sharing that. We're going to be covering a little bit about employee engagement and inclusion and well-being as well in a minute in this panel. And I'm going to come back to you to some of those points that you just mentioned. But before I do that, I'd like to pivot to this whole concept of care as a value. And I think in the first part of the conversation, you've covered a lot about what are we doing to take care of employee morale and employee effectiveness internally. So I maybe want to invite you to share with the group today who are listening to our panel today, how has care as a value outside of the organization has emerged even stronger because of the pandemic? Anybody would like to share how care as a values come, whether we use the word care or not, but how is it manifesting outside of the organization?
Sure, I'll be happy to go, Esther.
All right,
Thanks.
go ahead, Sean.
This is, interesting. I have to tie it right back to what I said earlier about our purpose statement, and the last part is to help feed the world. And so we look at that in a lot of different ways. And when the pandemic first hit, I mentioned that we had to get food back on store shelves. About 30% of the frozen and refrigerated food in the United States comes through one of our warehouses, and about 8% of it outside of the United States comes through one of our warehouses. And so there was a legitimate need to care for our communities and get food back on the shelves. And that was a real problem, a real issue that we had to step up to and to resolve. However, we couldn't do that unless we cared for our employees. And so unless we kept our team members safe, you heard in the news about companies that didn't do a great job of that, and I'm not going to disparage any of them. It was a very tough time. Nobody had answers, et cetera, et cetera. But we knew that from the very beginning, if we were going to do what our purpose was set out to do, that our team members had to come to work and they had to be safe doing it. And so it was really challenging. We put together a COVID playbook that we gave to every one of our 300 general managers around the world who run one of our warehouses, so that we were all doing the same things. Yeah. We updated it regularly. We dealt with the dynamic situation that was out there. And then once we sort of had our customers taken care of and our employees taken care of, then we started to look outside the company and said, wow, there's big problems in our communities right now. And, one of our significant charitable partners is Feeding America and the Global Food Banking Network. And we started talking to Feeding America and the Global Food Banking Network, and they started to talk to us about the need in our communities, given unemployment, given the fact that a lot of people who were living paycheck to paycheck were out of work at that point in time. There was going to be more people that visited food banks as first-time recipients of food from food banks than ever before. And so we said, we made a bold challenge, and we had a 100 million meal challenge that we put out there for ourselves. We said we were going to deliver 100 million meals to people in need around the world. We initially invested $5 million in doing that. But one of the other cool things is we engaged a bunch of people in this effort with us. So we had celebrity athletes like Steph and Ayesha Curry, Kyrie Irving. We ended up partnering with 11 different pro athletes and coaches and teams around the world. And all that was to help extend our own reach as a company out into the communities. So we kind of took this concept of caring. We had to take it at all three levels, and frankly, a bit of a priority order for us, because we had to do our job as a company first, and then we could start to give back to our communities second.
Wonderful, Sean. And I'm going to come to you in a minute on how these initiatives probably involve volunteers from your own organization, how that affected employee engagement. Jill or Madan, who wants to go next on the business case of care outside of the organization and how you've been able to contribute to society at large?
Esther, I would just say, as another food company, many of the challenges that Sean described were those that we experienced. And what we tried to do, because I think there were a lot of people who, especially those who were able to work from home, wanted to do more to help others. So as much as, they were dealing with their own anxiety, they recognized there were people with far more challenges than they had. We established for the first time an employee relief program, which allowed employees to donate to other employees who may be in need. So a fund that any employee can contribute to and any employee can seek support from based on their financial circumstances. So I think really just a way to allow people to engage with their employees. And then similarly, in working with companies like Feeding America, Rescue Bank, which supports pets, because there was such consumer demand, we found that those organizations weren't getting the same level of donations that they might in a normal course of business. So we made some adjustments in our giving to them to make sure that they had a supply that they could continue to depend on to meet those, as Sean said, just a growing number of people in need. And then also going back to our own employees, we have employee giving and matching opportunities for many organizations that have been in place for a long time, but through the pandemic, enhancing our communication and marketing around those internally, so that while people were unable, for example, to go to the food bank and donate and volunteer in person because of restrictions, financial resources were needed more than ever in those organizations. So it was taking things that we've done for a long time, but shining a new light on them, letting people know how they personally could make a difference. It's not just the stuff that the company's doing, but we, the company, are comprised of a lot of individuals, and how those choices that people could make could support, again, fellow employees and the broader community.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jill. And I'm going to come to you in a minute on how those opportunities that you provided to your employees created a larger sense of well-being or belonging as well, in a larger sense that, I'm going through challenges, but there are other people as well that I can contribute. So I'm going to come to you in a minute on how that affected health and well-being overall in the organization. So Madan, you want to share one example, and I'll quickly move to the second part. Yes.
I think, well, in the middle of this, we had a very serious event across the board in the US, really, on racial justice and police brutality. And this was a conversation that people wanted to talk. I mean, it was just a very important topic that you couldn't just say, oh, we support racial justice and we're against police brutality, or we support Black Lives Matter and walk away. Words were not enough. You had to go beyond words. I think we have a phenomenal D&I team led by Brian Douglas, who also is our head of recruiting, and he and his team really brought this issue up to the entire company. And our CEO was super supportive in saying, and he reached out, and the first thing that he did was amazing. He said, Ron, I want to go with your guidance. I don't want to just say words. I want to make sure we act on this. And this is an issue that really impacted everybody, and words are not going to be enough about it. So, and then we had a series of events internally in the company to talk about what does it actually mean. And our CEO made sure that we played a whole bunch of videos, be it Martin Luther King's great speech, I Have a Dream, and everything around making sure that we sensitize people that this is a serious matter. And we are absolutely, we're not just going to say that we use words and say, yep, this is something that we support and move on, but this becomes a dialogue in the company. And when our employees start to see that you would literally be ready to stop your business on a regular basis and make this top priority for those many weeks and have different dialogue, that's when they believe that this really matters. That's when they believe that they can have a voice. And this is just not a nameless, faceless corporation that just is doing business. It is actually making an impact, and a positive one in the community. If you don't get your employees to believe that, and the only way you can do that is through action, is not through putting up something on your website or on some poster, but it is through action. And it has to be led by the CEO. Then you are just going to be another nameless, faceless corporation, which, if you want to build a long-term business, and you can go, Gene and Sean come from companies that have been in business for very, very long time. That means they've done something right repeatedly, right? They have created this sense of community. And we are a very young company, or about 4.5, 5 years old. And of course, we want to say, how are we going to be sustainable and relevant for many, many years to come? Yes, our mission is you get up every day, and if you go to Google reviews on Blink Health, hundreds of people writing saying you saved my day, and this dinner with my granddaughter was possible because you saved me $300 on my medication, etc. That gives us our North Star. But then when you have an external event that is happening, I've just found that most young companies pay lip service, or they don't have the framework, and I'm not blaming them. They don't have the framework to deal with it. and they become less and less relevant to their employees, who have the total opposite view, saying, "Oh, this is very relevant for me. I want to have a dialogue. I want to have a conversation in the company. And hey, Miss CEO, Mr. CEO, stand up. Show up as a leader." And so many small companies don't have this framework, or just I wouldn't say ignore it on purpose, but don't make this very, very important to their daily running, because you've got to stop everything and focus on it. We were able to do that. Phenomenal support from our CEO, and that was just in addition to these great examples that my co-panelists have. I just wanted to share with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Madan, for bringing that. And I think that's the beauty of having a diverse panel to represent our audience who's listening to our panel today. Not only the large organizations who have done something sustainably fantastic for over a period of time, but also those young companies can also kind of relate to what you're sharing with us, Madan. So thank you so much. So very quickly, we have another just 12 minutes to go, and I want to make sure that we cover how volunteering can help us on our employee engagement efforts, mental health and well-being of our employees, and how can volunteering help us on an inclusive workplace. So I'm going to invite you, maybe each one of you, how volunteering can help us on employee engagement. Sean, I'm going to come to you on that. How volunteering can help us on keeping mental health and well-being of our employees. And Madan, Jay, I'll come to you on that. And then last, on inclusive workforce. And you've covered that already a little bit, Madan, but I maybe invite you to expand it to the concept of volunteering, because that's really relevant to our audience today, who not only CHROs, but leaders who are front-facing volunteering in their organizations as well. So, Sean, I'm going to start with you on how volunteering what's the role that volunteering can play on employee engagement? And what are the different avatars that employee engagement can bring, especially when we are now in a distance world? And you have 2 minutes to answer that question.
All right. I'll challenge accepted. Let me try this. So Madan did a fabulous job of talking about employee engagement and the work attributes of it, but I do think there is an element of volunteerism that can help with it, and that is that for us, we feel like food is universal. This notion of help feeding the world is universal, and so when we went out to pick our partner and partners in the world of volunteerism, I recall a meeting, my first meeting that I had with Feeding America. I was sitting in their headquarters in Chicago. They were about 10 minutes into their presentation, and I said, "Hey, I'm not sure why I didn't recognize this before, but you do exactly what we do. You just do it not for profit, and we do it for profit." And so right that minute, it opened up a discussion that we had about all the different ways that we could partner. And so we've had a 3 or 4-pronged approach, probably a 4-pronged approach since that day. One, we walked into the meeting knowing that we were going to give them money, so we still followed through on that promise. That was a key part of it, and will continue to be. These organizations need the money to do the great work that they do. The second piece is that we had a Feeding America food bank within driving distance from every single one of our warehouses. And so our employees can get in their cars or start at the workplace, do an event together. It's a great team building event. They do something good for the community, and they give back through a food-based charity in their community. The fourth thing is, and I think this is what makes our partnership with Feeding America really unique, because what we do exactly what they do, we were able to provide subject matter expert type volunteering to them on various topics. So whether it's food safety or whether it's personal health and safety, we had one of our data scientists from our office in San Francisco do an entire intermodal study of the United States and map out the best way for Feeding America to transport food around the country. It saves them millions of dollars a year from that one study, and the person that spent 6 months on that felt incredible about the work that they did. And then I would say the fourth prong here is that drives engagement with both our employees and our customers is that our customers will say, "Hey, we want to donate food to a local food bank." That food happens to be sitting in one of our warehouses on a rack somewhere. Our employees pull that food off the rack, load it in a truck, They know it's our customers' food. They know it's a donated product. They know it's going in a truck to a local food bank. They know that's another way that we're giving back to the community. And so I'd say it starts with finding the right partner for your business and what matters to your employees, and you'll drive an incredible amount of engagement from that point.
Thanks for sharing the four-pronged approach with these examples, Sean, for us to visualize how it matters to business, but it also matters to every individual who's contributed in those four different areas or different approaches to volunteering. So thanks for sharing that. Jill, I'm coming to you on how volunteering you've seen and giving back has helped you balance mental well-being, health, and just creating that feeling of belonging, but also feeling good about yourself. So do you want to share some of the insights on how volunteering has helped?
Of course, our purpose as a company is focused on how do we support communities and really creating an environment where communities can thrive at the individual level and at the macro level. And I think inherent to that is this idea of the role that connections and togetherness play. And you really experience that in the current environment where it's so much harder for people to be together. But it's this idea that when I connect with you and you connect with me, I am enriched by that experience. And so volunteering is really a natural way to bring people physically and spiritually together. And we really believe that when people do that, it strengthens individuals and by extension strengthens the society. So our volunteering efforts, certainly there's a financial responsibility and aspect of that we're really proud of. But equally, if not more important, is the human and employee volunteering such that it allows our employees to be together and in service of others, and then allows people to physically connect by doing good. So, some relationship to the current environment, and just maybe a few comments on mental health. I mentioned at the beginning that we have always embraced the concept of the whole person. And we quickly, along with many other organizations, and I think society at large, recognized that this was not just a physical public health crisis, but also a mental health challenge, not just now, but for time to come. And we engaged in an open conversation with our employees about that in a way that we never had as an organization, to acknowledge that our physical health and our mental health are equally important, and really encouraging people to think about that for themselves and their families. And something Sean said earlier, communicating things 7 times. The other thing I think we recognized with mental health is the conversation that we had in March and April and reminding people of resources. I don't think resonated with a lot of people because they didn't need those services then, and their families didn't need them. But as time marched on and the pressure and the burden of the situation continued, people needed help. People who had never needed help needed those resources. And so I think, something that an employee said to me last week really struck me all weekend. And she said, there's so much divisiveness in the environment. There's so many differing points of view, even around science and medicine. But I have a lot of trust, and I look to the company to kind of tell me what the company's point of view is. And I trust and I value that. And I think that's a huge responsibility that we have as corporations, but also an opportunity to play a role in people's lives in a way that is needed more than ever, whether that's honest and transparent communication or mental health. So just again, back to the whole person and embracing all of that in everything we do.
Beautifully said, Jill. And I think it's just so beautifully connected as you started with the whole and you ended as a whole. And I think that realization that normally when we used to volunteer, we always used to think of others in need, and then we're realizing that that others in need can be any of us. And I think that labeling that we're going also as a society, I think it's what brings us together. So thanks for sharing that example about your last weekend. I think that will resonate with many of our listeners today. So Madan, I'm going to come to you, and we just have 3 more minutes. So I'm going to challenge in just 1.5 minutes, if you could share with us how, and you've shared a story about building an inclusive workforce. I'd love to ask you for an example on how has volunteering or giving outside of the organization helped you build that inclusiveness of diversity on point of view, diversity of understanding, your customer needs. Any one example that you want to share with us?
Yep. Yeah, so we wake up every day. Our mission is to make prescription medication affordable to all of us in America. As I mentioned early on, it is not affordable to many people. And every day there is this view on saying that, hey, there is this work that you're doing. And then if you go back to the signs of happiness, and you can actually link the signs of happiness to volunteering very easily. I mean, this is a great book. And this, I think the father of that, or the guy who's considered to be the pioneer, is the scientist who wrote this book called Flow. His name is Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I hope I'm not butchered the last name. He wrote one of my favorite books called Flow, and then he actually describes the science of happiness. So one of the strong correlation scientifically is about your volunteering. And he goes on this volunteering, self-esteem and humor and everything else, but it's very specific around how, what is the impact volunteering has on the science of happiness. And then he links that very strongly to purpose. And when you have people who have very strong sense of purpose in whatever that they do, there is a very strong correlation to everything about being happy, going over and beyond what is expected out of them. Your world or universe expands around you because you feel that you're contributing something positively to the evolution of it. So if you go by the science of that, I mean, there is simply no two ways about linking these three things together. And I can just share one quick, and I have just a minute, and I'll just share my one personal example. This happened back when I was at Facebook. My business leader at that time, she's still there, Carolyn Iverson, she took all of our SVPs out to this village in Rajasthan in India. We spent a full 3 days building a school. And that village has really nothing, it's out of civilization. It took us a long time to reach there. But then the 3 days that I spent over there, and this is my home country of India, so I knew the place really well. But the 3 days that I spent there, just mingling with the local community, even to this day, when I meet my old colleagues in Facebook, that is the first thing we talk about. So the impact it has had on us has been tremendous. And I think all of us can attest to this, that it creates this sense of belonging to the universe. And so that's one example that I wanted to share.
Wonderful. Thanks, Madan, for sharing that as well. So last question, and we're really running out of time. I'm conscious. I could hear the blinks of your calendar. 5 minutes ago, there was like, ring, and just kind of, I'm conscious that you probably have another Zoom call just following immediately this one. So I'm going to invite you to close with 3 words when you think of volunteering. What are the 3 words that come to your mind? Jim, you would like to start? Just 3 words that come to your mind when you think of volunteering.
Yeah, thanks. It's a beautiful question. I would say community, hope, and humility.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you. Madan, 3 words that come to your mind when you think of volunteering.
I think it's purpose, belongingness, and community.
Wonderful. Thank you. Sean, your last 3 words before we close.
Thanks, Esther. It's 3 words, but one concept, and a lot of what my panelists have just said, but purpose, community, and service. I think if you have that purpose, and we don't treat work like someplace other than a community that it is, because it's part of the community, then service becomes easy, right? And so I appreciate the time on the panel today. Thanks,
Wonderful.
Esther.
Thank you. So my last 3 words when I think of volunteering, energy, multiplier, and abundance. So thank you so much for your time, Jill, Sean, Madan, you've been fantastic. I've learned a lot, and it was a privilege to have you as part of the panel, and I'm sure everyone enjoyed listening to you. So I appreciate your time. Have a wonderful day. And thanks everyone who joined us for this panel. It was really fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.